So for those of you who weren't here for the last couple of weeks, yesterday was my last Saturday morning service with Congregation Beth Sar Shalom. And so we had a goodbye time, and I wanted to bring them a message saying goodbye. And getting to that point, I thought I'd recount the history of how we got from A to Z, from my wife first coming here and setting up Congregation Beth Sar Shalom. It's been 27 years. A couple people had posted on Facebook, the end of an era. It sounds kind of dramatic, but I guess if I think about it, it kind of is, you know. My wife and I, we really brought organized Messianic Judaism to Tucson. We were the innovators for that. We brought the first Messianic synagogue here, and a lot changes. Things change. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about this morning. I want to share some of the information I shared with them. Starting off with Ecclesiastes chapter 3, it says there's a time for everything. Time for every season and every activity under heaven. So, it's been a long time that I shared the story of how Book of Life got here. And so I'm going to share that story with you, and then a couple more passages of Scripture to kind of wrap things up and talk about the change. And again, for those of you who weren't here, yesterday was my last Saturday at Congregation Beth Sar Shalom, but this is not my last Sunday at Book of Life Community Church. So, that is so nice. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Thank you for letting me stay. But I am staying in a different capacity. I'll still be bringing you the message most Sundays, but I'll be here kind of on a part-time capacity, and I'm no longer the guy in charge. So that just means if you got a problem, it's not my problem. And that's kind of the stress and the pressure a guy wants to get away from, you know. I wanted to step down from having that sign on my desk that says, "The buck stops here." I give that sign to Michael and Nick now. The buck can stop with them. It's a lot of pressure and a lot of hard work in leadership. I was talking to Mike earlier, and he said he served on a church board once, and he said he'd rather have a root canal than do it again. Yeah, I've done it for 27 years. I got it, man. I understand completely. Ditto, I'd rather have another root canal. It's hard work. And I was talking to Danny, and I said, you know, think of a cell phone. And when you get it right out of the box and you're surfing the web, the thing goes dead in like 2 hours. But to charge it up overnight, I mean, technology is getting better and better, but still, hours to recharge, but not a lot of time to drain it. And so it's, you know, my cell phone's been drained, and I'm trying to recharge. And hopefully, by God's grace, it won't take 27 years. So how did we get here? How did Book of Life get here? How did Beth Sar Shalom get here? I went to Moody Bible Institute in 1986, Jewish Studies Department, and I also worked for an organization called Jews for Jesus. 1986, seems like a long time ago. Wow. Spent a year there, and at Moody Bible Institute, you don't just study, they require every student to have what they call a PCM, or Practical Christian Ministry. So if you're studying to be a pastor, while you're working on your classes and doing your papers, you have to serve in a church. Maybe be a Sunday school teacher and maybe bring the message 6 times, and you got to do that 1 year. And then the next year, maybe you have to do a rest home ministry. You have to do something, Practical Christian Ministry. I was in the evangelism department, and I was in the Jewish Studies department, so we did evangelism, street evangelism, door-to-door, phone calling, passing out tracts on the street. And I had done that, and I was trained with Jews for Jesus. I had done it in Chicago. I'd done it in New York, and I knew what I was doing. So they asked me if I could lead up one of those PCMs, Practical Christian Ministries, teach other students how to do street evangelism, do door-to-door evangelism. And I said, sure, happy to, love to. This young, cute little girl from Arizona was assigned to me. Her name was Deanne. Blonde hair, blue eyes, sweetest little thing. And she had to learn how to do this frightening thing, passing out tracts on streets and going door to door. And I was her instructor, in a sense, her team leader. And I said, I'll help you out. It's really easy to pass this course. All you got to do is marry me. You graduate. So she graduated. We met in 87, got married in 88. And I graduated with a degree in Jewish studies. She graduated with an MRS. You got to think on that. What's MRS? A Mrs. degree? She got her putting hubby through, her PhD. She stopped going to school so that I could finish school. She worked full time. She and I left Jews for Jesus, and we started ministering with Soviet Jewish immigrants. It was around the time that the wall came down and Jews were pouring out of the Soviet Union. You know, for ever since communism, even before, but in communism, Jewish people were persecuted, but they were not allowed to leave the country. How messed up is that? We hate Jews, you got to stay here. Why did they have to stay? Because they make money for the country. You know, Russians were not nice, the communists were not nice. But when the wall fell and the Iron Curtain fell, then Jewish people got to leave. And many of them came to the United States, many of them went to Israel. And my wife, we're working with them, helping them learn American culture. And these people talk about oppressed. You just don't understand what oppression means in this country. One of the people we ministered to was a librarian in Soviet Russia. Never touched a Bible. There was one in the library, in the basement, under lock and key. And if she, the librarian, expressed an interest in reading it or touching it, she would have been jailed. Now she comes to the United States. She knows she's Jewish, but doesn't know anything about being Jewish. And we get to teach her about American culture. We get to teach her about being Jewish. And we get to teach her about Yeshua, about Jesus. It was wonderful, and that's the kind of thing we did. These people would come into our grocery stores. You put them in front of the aisle of cereal. These people, not exaggerating, would stand in line all day for bread. That's how the Soviet Union was when the Iron Curtain fell. And then they come to our grocery store, and they get into the cereal aisle. How do you choose? We took one family with us to Baskin-Robbins one day. 31 flavors! They gave us the ice cream, and then when they finished, they said, what do we do with the cup and the spoon? We said, throw it away. They looked at us like we were crazy. Why would you throw that away? They're perfectly good. Welcome to America. We throw it away. They said, really? Really? So we took it and we threw it in the trash. They took theirs, they brought it to the trash, and then they pulled it back. And then they threw it in the trash and they giggled. Different in the world. We helped them find jobs. We helped them find apartments. We helped them understand how American life works. And our ministry was active. We were working with as many people as we had the time to work with while still finishing school and still working. And then after Jews for Jesus, got involved with the Conservative Baptist Home Mission Board, which later became the Missions to the Americas. And we were appointed to continue doing Jewish work with the ultimate goal of going to the metro New York area where most of the Jews in the world lived. There were more Jews in that area than in Israel at the time, if I'm not mistaken. So, my wife, coming from a conservative Baptist background, introduced me to her pastor here in Tucson. We came out for a summer trip, and he said, you know, you've got to raise funds to do your ministry. Why don't you move to Tucson for a few months? I'll introduce you to all the pastors, the conservative Baptist pastors. You can raise your funds. The ministry said, you know, Jewish ministry is very popular. You'll be able to raise your support 1.5 to 2 years. We'd already been at it a year in Chicago and weren't making much headway, but the movement was strong out here, so we moved out here, expecting to be here 6 months to a year. Still here. When we got here, we wanted to join whatever Messianic congregation was here, and we were surprised to find there was no Messianic congregation here. So my wife and I, to help the Jewish believers and the people who are interested in Jewish Christian stuff from a healthy, well-balanced perspective, decided to start a Friday night Bible study at the Eastside Baptist Church. which we did, and we continued to minister to Soviets, and we continued to raise funds for the trip to the Metro New York area, and we both had jobs. And after a year of that, I said, this is too much. They wanted us to move to New York and finish our fundraising, which we'd already done for 2 years, and we were less than halfway there. And moving to New York with their expensive prices, we would have been like starting all over again. I was like, we left a good ministry in Chicago to come here. The Friday night Bible study is doing great. To leave another ministry to raise funds for indefinitely, and the people here need us. I think we're staying. We're going to stay. And the people on Friday night, they said, hey, why don't we start a Messianic synagogue here in Tucson? I thought, wow, I guess we could do that. So my wife and I turned that Friday night Bible study into Tucson's first regular Messianic synagogue, 1990, 1991, that time frame. Well, congregation did pretty good, but we moved from that location to the North Swan Baptist Church and started growing. Actually, we outgrew the fellowship hall we were using at the Eastside Baptist Church. The North Swan Baptist Church made their sanctuary available to us, so we moved over there, and we were holding services over there. And after being there some time, I don't know exactly how long, the pastor from the Eastside Baptist Church said that they were closing their doors, they were shutting down their church, and if we wanted to buy it, we could have the building that we started in. So, well, we don't have money to buy a church. He said, no, well, we own it outright, and we don't want to sell it for a profit. We can't sell it for a profit. We're a nonprofit, and we're closing our doors. If you'll give us enough money to fund our missions program for the next 20, 25 years, you can have the building, and you can make monthly payments, and all the money will go to missionaries. Win-win. So we ended up buying that building, and that was our first official location. We were the second Messianic synagogue that I knew of in the United States that actually owned its own building. There might have been more, but I didn't know about them. Most Messianic synagogues were renting space from churches because the movement was new and young, and it takes a lot of people to maintain a facility. And there's not a lot of Jewish people, period, let alone Messianic Jewish people. But God blessed us. We had a building, and then we started renting out to startup churches, which was pretty cool, kind of turned the tables a little bit in a good way. Well, sometime around when these things were happening, we were at Beth Har Shalom for some years, and I had it in my heart to start ministering to orphans. I didn't know any orphans. I just knew the Bible said God loved orphans and we should be considerate of them. So I took it seriously, and I wanted to start helping orphans. Where do I find orphans? I don't know. Said, I know there's a lot of poor people south of the border. Maybe I can go help orphans in Mexico. So I started talking to people with ministry in Mexico, and they said, the orphans are pretty much taken care of. The state takes care of them, just kind of like they do in the United States. But here, let me show you something. So we got in a car, and we drove into a colonia. A colonia was a group of people that moved to that area that had nothing, and they all got together. We saw houses made out of hoods of cars. Those were the nice houses. Houses made out of pallets, the kind of pallets they stack water on with no walls, just wind going through them. Houses made out of pallets. We saw houses on side of hills, but nobody knew to level the hill, so the houses were tilted. And people who just lived there without houses. And then over time, the pallets might get a wall, and they might get another wall, and they might get a roof. Well, when we were in this colonia, my heart was touched for these people. I said, well, maybe I can't help orphans, but I can help poor people. So me and my friend, we just started coming to that colonia, bringing some food, bringing some clothing, bringing some toys for the kids. We had found out from the people who are doing ministry in Mexico that you can't do that. There's rules. You can't cross the border with this stuff. You got to pay taxes, and you got to talk to the government, and you got to yada, 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 and it's impossible. A lot of red tape. I said, yeah, that's nice. I'm going to do it anyway. There's poor people over there. They need help. I'm going to help them. I'm going to put stuff in my car and drive it across. What are they going to do, kill me? So we started doing that. Started filling up my trunk, and then my buddy brought his car. We started filling up his trunk, and we shared it with the rest of the congregation. Next thing you know, we got caravans of 15, 20 cars trying to help the entire colonia. And by this time, I thought, we're bringing them toys, food, and clothes, I'd like to help them with medicine. So I had a relationship with the seminary in Nogales and with a pastor who lived on this side of Nogales, who ministered in Nogales. And I said, do you know any doctors? He says, yeah, I know a Mexican doctor. Think he might be willing to go down with us so we can help him with medicine? Oh, yeah. So we started bringing that doctor with us to that colonia. Well, unbeknownst to us, we were being observed. And the doctor and one of the local pastors, not from that colonia, but from another part of Nogales, Mexico, said, how did you get into that colonia? We've been trying to get into that colonia to minister for years. We just showed up and brought stuff. We didn't know there was a rule or a way. So I said we were being observed, right? One day we're there passing out stuff, and the doctor's visiting with people, and somebody calls us over to a room. There's actually a room, a building. It's got a roof and everything. He said, the mayor wants to talk to you. The mayor? Yeah, the mayor of the colonia wants to talk to you. Okay. So I went over there with a couple of my friends, including the interpreters, and we sat down, conference table, very formal. I'm with the mayor, for goodness sakes. Dignitary. He said, we like what you're doing in our colonia, thank you. And we would like to give you a piece of property to build a church here. The locals, the pastor, the doctor, and the people with him were like, they just kept their mouths shut. This was unprecedented to them, that this was happening. And I was like, cool, let's do it. We started bringing over a seminary student. One of their requirements for graduation was planting a church. So while we're passing out clothes and the doctor's visiting people and we're ministering to children, he's preaching. And after we helped them acquire the property and helped them get their first load of bricks, we backed out. Said, it's your ministry now, you know? We don't know what we're doing. We just stumbled into this, and you even speak the language. Just go for it. And we helped plant a church in that colonia, and we went back several times to continue ministering. But we had also started, my wife and I, going to Scottsdale once a month to start a Messianic fellowship up there in partnership with Chosen People Ministries. And I don't know, 3 to 5 years we were going up there once a month. And that at the Scottsdale Bible Church is where we met, in their chapel. And that ministry was growing quite well. And the Colonia thing was going quite well. And then I got a phone call from the El Camino Baptist Church. We had been friends for years, and I had spoken there in the past. They said, our pastor's going on an extended vacation. Would you come fill in on Sunday mornings while he's gone? We know you speak on Saturdays, but you can bring the same message, and that's all we want you to do. It won't be hard if you could just show up and give a message. I'd love to, be happy to. So the message, the series I was given at that time was called Grits, you know? And I don't know, grace, repentance, Yeshua, G-R-Y-T, the Trinity, and salvation. That was my series, one each week. I was getting, 3 or 4 weeks into the Grits. Pastor was supposed to be coming back, and the elders came up to me with a very concerned and nervous look on their faces and said, Steve, our pastor just resigned. He's not coming back at all. Do you think you could serve some potatoes and toast with those grits? Good sense of humor. I said, I'd love to. I will stay until you find your new pastor. So I stayed with El Camino Baptist Church about a year. Met some amazing people there, right, Abneys? I met the Abneys there. That was cool. They wouldn't let me go. They followed me over to Book of Life. So anyway, spent about a year there at El Camino. Finished up. Got a phone call from, oh, by the way, because of ministering at El Camino, I stopped doing the Scottsdale thing, and I stopped doing the Colonia thing. I passed the Colonia on to somebody else at Beth Sar Shalom, and I just said, I'm done with Scottsdale. I'm going to focus here. So after that year, and I did a lot more than teach. I got very active with all the ministries there, served passionately, and loved it. It was a great year. Still served at Beth Sar Shalom, and Beth Sar Shalom grew during that time too, and our relationship together was great. But then I got a phone call from Crossroads Church, said, hey, we saw what you did. It was the pastor. He says, I'm going out on the mission field. Would you come take over until, preach until we get our new pastor? I'm like, yeah. We got some people from Crossroads here too this morning who have joined our congregation, which is pretty cool. So while I was at Crossroads, and I was there for 2 years, the church grew, and that went well, and I was loving every minute of that. Preaching Saturday and Sunday, bringing Jewish messages or flavored messages to Gentiles, and they like it, and I like it. Maybe I should keep doing this. So the idea got into my mind to start another congregation, a Sunday congregation, and told the leaders of Beth Star Shalom I was going to start a Sunday congregation. And my time at Crossroads extended longer than I expected it to. I didn't expect it to go 2 years. I expected it to be about a year. So I actually started Book of Life before I ended Crossroads. So I would finish up speaking at Crossroads, and then during the closing worship, I would drive over to Book of Life and come while worship had already started here and do the message here. And that was cool. Now, sometimes during that mix, and it's been a long time, so my brain gets a little confused. Sometime during that mix, I had started the Association of Messianic Congregations and was its founding president, and I started seminary. Seminary was awesome because it was all online, and they had no deadlines. It wasn't like, okay, you've got to finish this course within 3 months, and you've got a paper due every Friday and read this book by Thursday. Here's your entire month's worth of work. Get it done whenever you want. And when you get it done, you can get your next class. Okay, great. That's my kind of scheduling, by the way. So if I'm working really hard in the Colonia or working hard with the Association of Messianic Congregations, I'm too busy to study, I don't study. Things cool down, I study hard. Do a paper, read a book, take a break. Finish that master's degree. If I had done it full time, it would have been 1 year. It took me 5 years. But I knew the time was going to pass anyway, so I could chip away at it and get it done. So I did that. By the time we started Book of Life, I was still the president of the Association of Messianic Congregations for a while, and then I ended up stepping out of that. Well, Book of Life and Beth Star Shalom were both growing in our little building on 4th Street, and we needed to go somewhere else. And we started looking for a new building, but we couldn't find one because buildings are extremely expensive. And even though we were growing, we weren't big enough to afford a building. We didn't know what we were going to do because that building over there sat 100 people. This one sits like 400, to give you an idea. And we were quickly approaching. In fact, we had to bring in some more chairs, and we crammed in like 120 people. But that was it. What do we do now? Well, maybe we start using the kitchen area, put a TV in there. Maybe we go to 2 services. Maybe we buy, I don't know, we're talking. And around this time, one of our leaders who had a strong relationship with Palo Verde Baptist Church said, why don't you talk to the leaders over at Palo Verde Baptist Church? Why? Well, they don't have a pastor. Oh, I'm already pastoring 2 churches. I don't want to pastor another church. Just go talk with them. No, I don't want to talk with them. I'm busy. I don't want to talk with them. That conversation lasted about a year, if I recall right. And I don't know what happened at the end of the year. God talked some sense into me or something. I don't know. But I said, okay, I'll go over and talk with them. And so I met. Randy was at that meeting. Randy Williamson, our Awana commander, was at that meeting. And a couple of other people who aren't here. And we talked about, basically, you have a group of people and you need a building. We have a building and need a group of people. You're a pastor. We need a pastor. Certainly, we can make something work. I don't want to pastor a 3rd church. No, you don't understand. Maybe we can bring Book of Life together with Palo Verde Baptist Church and become one. Oh, well, that's in thought. So we started talking about doing that. And after several months of talking about what that would look like, that's exactly what happened. Our corporations merged, and we absorbed Palo Verde Baptist Church. And Book of Life became this. And that was, 8, 10 years ago or something, Michael? Something like that. Does anybody know? 2005? 2007? I'm not sure. So that's how we got from there to here. If it wasn't for my time at El Camino, I don't think this would have happened, because it was my strong ties to the Baptist community that allowed Palo Verde Baptist Church to trust me with inheriting their legacy. Oh, he pastored over at El Camino. If he's good enough for them, he's good enough for us. Plus, my wife and I started with the whole conservative Baptist thing when we got here. If it hadn't been for my time at El Camino and Crossroads, and I was active at Calvary Chapel at that time too. I wasn't on staff, but I was very active. And watching Pastor Robert bounce from location to location, I probably never would have thought I could also start Book of Life. It never even crossed my mind when I finished Moody Bible Institute that I'd even be a pastor. I thought I was going to be an evangelist. You know, you just don't know what's going to happen. So I started making a list of the things that happened and the ministries that we've been active in since we moved. We started the Russian ministry first in Chicago, then we started one in Tucson, then the Bible study, then Beth Sar Shalom, then the ministry to Nogales, then the ministry to Scottsdale, the Association of Messianic Congregations Book of Life. Didn't even think to throw in there the TV ministries, the one that we had to do locally and then the one at God's Learning Channel. We come up with about 10 ministries, and I think in about 27 years. And I was fascinated by seeing how it's all tied together. Only God knows the end from the beginning, but when we look back, we can see how it all fit together in such a cool way.